I found a somewhat quiet spot and I'm earthing. And I was thinking about how talking so much about all of this related to mental health is really to learn about it, just to be free of it, not to keep talking about it forever. To be free of it and be that other kind of human being that I've experienced myself to be. And that really requires looking without condemnation, but really wondering to figure out how it all works. And in order to learn about it, if one calls it good or bad, it prevents learning. And I was thinking about how it's important to be free of fear, because it's the fear that drives us to seek help from the mental health system. And to me, that exacerbates things more than necessary. And it could take a good amount of practice and wondering and tweaking to find a way to make it so one can avoid the mental health system. So I wanted to take a second and read a quote by Krishnamurti. I feel like what he points to has something to do with map consciousness. And I'm not saying it's totally equivalent, but he says, I think man has come to a point where he feels that one must have a new mind, a new quality of mind. I mean by mind the activities of the brain, consciousness, sensory perception, and intelligence. Is it possible before man destroys himself completely to bring about a new mind? Is it possible for human beings to bring about a totally different category or dimension of the mind? And to me, I feel like map consciousness is consciousness's attempt to bring about this new dimension and category in the mind, and it's not really working so easily as people at the level of thought consciousness transform it into something else, sort of capture those minds and convert that process back into a process dominated by thought and thinking about oneself and one's own problems, and making it into a me mental illness. So maybe it's already happening, it's just a matter of people supporting people to journey through it. Maybe nothing else needs to be done except for that. Just having more compassion while people go through this process without drugging them back into believing that they have a mental illness. And he says also, when you put away something false, the mind becomes lighter. And the me is false, and when we put that away, we become lighter, we become more energetic. And he describes something interesting. He says, discard everything that is false, which is everything that thought has put together. Then the mind has no illusion. And he talks about reading the book of oneself. And he says, I began with the first chapter, which says, be aware of your senses. And the next chapter says, human beings have their partial senses, exaggerating one sense and denying the others. The third chapter says, see, all the senses can operate. That means there is no center of a particular sensory operation. and the 4th chapter, and so on and so on. I'm not going to read the book for you. Read it and explore. But so much of what he points to is talking about map consciousness, and I feel like he had a transformation experience. He definitely did, but luckily he was held and kept safe by so many people who didn't think that anything that was happening was wrong. Plus, it was 100 years ago now, so there wasn't really that paradigm so much. So I'm starting to read more Krishnamurti stuff again instead of focusing on mental health. And I have done a lot of writing, but I feel not so compelled to go to it. It's like that process could go on forever, and I don't know if I want to keep fueling that. Just because it can go on forever doesn't mean that I should fuel it to go on forever. And I could change my mind and get right back into it very soon, but for now, I'm not sure how much of my notes I'll go over. I remember reading through some of it just to see if there was anything I really wanted to say, and I wrote down that thought in a way is yester sound, it's sound of yesterday. And something I realized today was that I was watching a talk by Krishnamurti, and he was talking about how we live very mechanically in the thought programs, basically. And I feel like these thought programs are in our brain, and they're soundscapes, and they're yester sound. And I feel like the sound is actually blocking the energy of our heart. So our heart is love. And we all have a heartbeat, we all have that love, but it's being blocked by this cage of yester sound. And I feel like when that breaks open, it's just living according to love and not this mechanical thought programs. And so I wonder if I can live according to love. And I was seeing a lot more beauty lately, but that seems to have decreased somewhat. I'm not sure why. I think it could be because I've been taking this Seroquel for longer than I've wanted to, mainly to get myself to ECPR, which is in a couple days. So after that, I will stop taking the Seroquel. I'm kind of tired of needing to drug myself to stay in this sort of limited form. And today I met somebody who wrote a book on her journal of being a psych nurse, and it had several stories about her connecting with patients on the psych unit that she worked on. And I read the whole thing in one sitting, and then I told her, and she's like, wow, that was quick. And I said, well, it's my genre. And it's interesting because I'm pretty sure in a video yesterday or the day before, I said to myself that I feel like I want to do something just to put myself in that mode of mental health. And then it just came up in conversation that she wrote this book, and she happened to have a copy, and she gave it to me to read, and I read it, and it was quite touching, and it's very much exactly in alignment with ECPR. So I feel like it could be a synchronicity in a way. And I told her that I have a label, and she was surprised that I wear the bracelet with my label on it, and I explained why, even though I was almost thinking, wow, it would be good to not have that immediately as how I would be helped, possibly, but whatever. In these last couple days, I've had a bit of doubt on the self-dialogue process in general. Not the process, but possibly about sharing it or I feel it's important to always be dropping the meanings that I make. So I make all these meanings to have a different context, but it's important not to cling on to any of them. The greatest moment of the day was saving a little beetle from a spider web. I saw him walking in circles because his leg was attached to a spider web.
This little guy is stuck on a spider web.
And I saved him with a stick. And I don't know how many people take the trouble of saving insects, but his little life will live on as it's meant to. Speaking of which, that's really good timing. There's a fly on my head. And I can't remember if yesterday I talked about how a bluebird nearly landed on my hand. I would hold it out like this, and he might have thought there was food, but he attempted to land twice, and there was no food, so that could have been why he didn't land. But I'm going to try and see if one day he'll land just for the sake of love, not for the sake of food. Because I haven't fed this bird, because it's not the greatest to feed wild birds. And I haven't yet attached my grasshopper takeoff video. Or my feet relaxing video.
Was that the rain?
So yeah, I feel like something shifted these last few days, and it could be taking the Seroquel, it could be taking the Hearty Nutritionals, or both. And I feel a bit more calm in terms of doing the self-dialogue. I just want to really enjoy being in California, and I don't want to be doing 2 hours of self-dialogue a day, so maybe I'll keep it more to a journal of what's happening in terms of this Hearty Nutritionals process, and seeing if I can be off the Seroquel in California, seeing how long I'll be able to stay in California. I am hoping mid-July at least, and maybe mid-August, but we'll see how it goes, because I may just have to go home and come off these medications and up the Hearty Nutritionals or something. I'm not going to stay down here and take Seroquel every day. I feel like my job is partly to stay sane in an insane world. And I was watching a video by Simon Sinek, and I didn't watch the whole thing because he started talking again about Navy SEALs, like he likes to do, and I just don't think promoting killing is my thing. So using that as an example of high performance is, I don't know, it's just a little bit, it shouldn't exist. So yeah, anyway. But he did say that a tip for something along moving towards your spark or something is, as long as what you're doing isn't getting in the way of what other people want, or you getting what you want getting in the way of what other people want. So this self-dialogue is good because this doesn't prevent anyone from getting help from psychiatry if that's what they want. It's just creating other contexts to help myself avoid psychiatry, get through it when I do have to access that, hopefully transcend psychiatry, and also maybe one day move this whole process into a realm that isn't a medical problem. Right now it's turned into a medical problem. Anything can be turned into a medical problem. But yeah, part of this shift, I think, is something to do with just remaining kind of quiet and seeing what other layers just need to fall away. And this is a good place to do it just because I'm in California, somewhere quiet. It's just going into this sort of healing mode, I think. Maybe healing some of the stuff that has more of an opportunity to heal in this quiet, beautiful place, instead of just self-dialogue, writing down insights all the time. Because the thing with that process is when I decide to go back into it, it will definitely just reignite. It's not something that one loses. So knowing that, I can kind of turn off that faculty and just be for a while. Like today I was sitting outside and I was very content with just listening to the flies buzz around, land on leaves, and play chase. And as two of them would fly by me, about 4 inches apart, I swear I could hear where the producers of Star Wars got their inspiration for all their aircraft flying through space in those fighting scenes, like and today I saw a lizard that, just the way the sun was hitting the side of his abdomen, there was a rainbow on his skin, and it must have just been the perfect angle for me to see that, and it's probably like that on all of them all the time. But he was really absorbing all the colors of the light, not just the heat of the sun. And I took a video of a lizard that I put my toe near and he wouldn't move.
Lizard. Why aren't you scared of the lizard? What's up, buddy?
It was kind of cool. That infinity of nature is always there to connect with it any moment. And I heard somebody talking about accents, and then sometimes words make my brain have a hint of something regarding map consciousness, but I was thinking of mania as a sort of accent of a different language, just like there can be many different kinds of English accents. One could be accented with mania and speak in a little bit different way. Like some people say that gay people speak in a way that is gay, and that's sort of a stereotype that may or may not be true, and people may or may not want to ascribe to, but there could be at some point just a manic accent, in that if we're able to prune the process and remain somewhat functional, we might just have an accent of mania instead of this thing that psychiatry would like to call a mood disorder. I think we're moody because we're reacting to society and we're calling it out to the detriment of ourselves. So in map consciousness, the me isn't doing well, but the mind is just fine. So what other layers of this me can fall away because I'm in a safe place where I don't really need those defenses right now. I'm not working in mental health. I'm not needing to get all up in arms about stuff. So can I release that and practice abiding in this other state and bring that back when I go back home versus being so charged by things. And I really don't know. But I have been sitting quietly and meditating many nights, and I don't think it's necessary per se, but it could in a way help to calm my nervous system. And I did call this sort of a glad park thing in a way. So this would be an ideal scenario, and letting that ideal environment permeate my biology and my nervous system and see what happens, if there can be some healing there. And that might show more than talking about stuff in circles, to be able to abide in that calmness and take that back. So I will talk about a few things, but I'm seeing now as I'm talking about it, the value of perhaps just calming down with it all. And maybe that calmness will help to ground some of that manic energy if it comes when I eventually journey off these medications. And it's the gesture of the mind to reach out and touch us. And I really feel like it's breaking up these mechanized thought structures, and we're actually learning how to be human beings without these mechanical actions. And I wonder how to really bring in the love and the compassion, and to have that animate, and to be really grounded in that and not reactive even when it comes to mental health stuff. Like, can I bring ECPR back home without even needing it? Can I use this time to heal? And there's another thing that Krishnamurti said in a video that really struck me with what I've been talking about with language and stuff was the observer creates the linguistic difference between the observer and the thing observed. And he talks a lot about being with fear and facing fear, and I think that by taking Seroquel, I definitely don't face the fear, and I'm not with the fear. I medicate it away. And he also talks about authority, and I feel like when I go to the psych ward, it's like using that authority to save me because I can't face the fear. And I really don't know. I haven't gone into that, but the fear will need to be faced. And maybe it's not fear at all. Maybe it's just this strong physiological reaction that I interpret as fear, so I don't allow it to run its course. And Krishnamurti talks about a non-mechanical way of living, and he says the way we live now is very mechanical. And I know from the felt sense of map consciousness that it's definitely not a mechanical state. It's breaking out of that mechanized way of being and being totally fluid and flowing with the moment. And I just wonder why that can't be maintained. Why can't that effortlessness be maintained? And then when we go back down to the level of mechanization, it feels so difficult. It feels like so much more effort. And that effortlessness requires sensitivity and intelligence. But the trouble is, there's too much noise in this world to live that way and be that sensitive.